In June 2006, a 38-year-old man didn't show up for work in Warble, Victoria in Australia. What started as a regular missing person report soon turned into one of Victoria's most confusing cold cases. Christopher Jarvis was living a normal, settled life. Everyone in his town knew him, and he seemed like a really hardworking and caring person. He was a dad to 3 kids and lived in Wangham near Warham. On June 13, 2006, people started getting worried when Christopher didn't show up for work. It was super weird for him to miss a day without telling anyone, and when people tried calling him, nobody could reach him. As time went by, his family and the people he worked with got more and more worried. When he still hadn't shown up, his family made the really hard choice to call the police and report him missing. They really hoped everything would work out okay and that Christopher would come home safe and sound. That same day, something really shocking was found at the Thunder Point Lookout, which is a spot by the coast. A silver 1991 Ford station wagon was found completely on fire, and emergency services rushed over. The firefighters got there fast and worked hard to put out the fire. After the fire was out, the investigators looked at what was left of the burned car and figured out that it belonged to Christopher. Finding this made everyone even more worried and uncomfortable about his disappearance, and it made them officially file a missing person report later that day. At first, the police treated it like a normal missing person case. At that point, there wasn't any real proof that something bad had happened to him, so the investigation was all about trying to find Christopher and figure out why he suddenly disappeared. The police officers talked to people, checked out where he had been, and searched all around the area, but they couldn't find any sign of him anywhere. Every day that went by without any new clues just made the family even more upset and worried. Even though things seemed really concerning, the case stayed as a missing person investigation for years and years. Without finding a body or any clear proof that a crime happened, the police could only do so much. People started gossiping and guessing about what might have happened. But since there wasn't any new information, the police kept their official position the same. The investigation stayed completely stuck for almost 20 years. In 2022, the Victoria Police's Missing Persons Squad got some new information from regular people in the public. This new clue made the police decide to reopen the case that had been sitting there for so long. The new investigation soon had the police doing big searches in the Framlingham Forest area, a place that would later become super important to the whole case. After all this happened, Stephen Johnson was officially charged in November 2022, along with another guy named Glenn Ernest Fenwick, who was also accused. The arrests were a really big deal in the investigation, showing that the police believed they had finally found enough information to bring the people responsibly to justice. But then, the case hit another problem when in August 2023, the charges against both men were dropped because there wasn't enough evidence. This decision left a lot of people feeling disappointed and frustrated because the truth about what happened to Christopher was still a mystery. In a really dramatic change of events, the investigation kept going and changing. Stephen Johnson was arrested again in March 2025 and charged once more with killing Christopher. The new charges showed that the police had gathered more evidence or gotten more people to testify, enough to look at the case again. As the legal stuff moved forward, Johnson's health became a really important topic in what the court was deciding. In August 2025, Justice Rita Inserti of the Victorian Supreme Court let him out on bail, saying there were special circumstances because of his physical and mental health problems, which needed special medical treatment. The rules attached to Johnson's bail were really strict and covered everything. They included putting up $500,000 as surety, having to check in with the police 3 times every week, and not being allowed to visit Framlingham Forest, where the police said Christopher's remains were buried. Johnson also wasn't allowed to contact any witnesses who were connected to the case. These restrictions were put in place to make sure he wouldn't mess with the investigation that was still going on or try to influence what people might say in court. His response to the conditions was, "Thank you, Your Honor. I will obey all those orders as I have previously." Even with all these rules, both the prosecution and the Jarvis family really didn't want him to get bail. They said they were really worried that Johnson might try to mess up justice by tampering with evidence or trying to talk to witnesses. Their fears showed just how emotional and legally complicated a case that had already gone on for almost 20 years really was. The case is set to go to a committal hearing in January 2026, where a magistrate will decide if there's enough evidence to move forward to a full trial. Meanwhile, Glenn Fenwick, who was accused along with Johnson, took a different legal route. In March 2025, he said he was guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter and got sentenced to 5.5 years in prison. During an emotional hearing at the Supreme Court in Warrnambool, Justice Michael Croucher actually broke down crying as he talked about the horrible details of how Christopher died. He also said that the victim's family might have a hard time accepting the sentence he gave. He said, "I I dare say to Mr. Jarvis's loved ones, this will seem a paltry sentence for the taking of his life, and for the many years of uncertainty, false hope, and unbearable grief they have had to suffer. He added, it just must be a terrible thing. All I can say is I am sorry for your loss. My heart is with you. Fenwick had given really important information to the police before about where the alleged burial site was, and this information helped bring the cold case back to life after the 2022 tip from the public. Fenwick told a psychiatrist before his sentencing that he felt ongoing guilt, regret, and shame for not doing anything to help Christopher when he was hurt. But he said that Johnson had supposedly told him, if you say anything, you will be next. A forensic psychiatrist named Professor Rajan Darji said he was horrified, traumatized, and felt really guilty in the years before he was arrested. The court heard that Christopher was killed with a baseball bat and his body was buried in a shallow grave. As the investigation keeps going, the Jarvis family stays strong in asking the public to help find Christopher's remains, and they talk about their ongoing grief and their hope for closure after so many years of questions that nobody has answered. In October 1994, people got worried when a woman didn't show up for work in Las Colinas, Texas. For decades, her family and friends didn't have any answers. Megan Bate Johns was born on January 29, 1965 in Dallas, Texas. She grew up in the Dallas area where she lived with her dad, Don Johns, who was a really respected and internationally famous speech pathologist who specialized in cleft palates. He worked at the UT Southwestern Medical Center, and everyone knew him for how much he cared about helping other people overcome speech problems. Megan grew up with her brother and half-sister, and they were all surrounded by a supportive but very academically focused family. Growing up in that kind of environment shaped her into a caring and hardworking woman who really felt empathy for other people. At 29 years old, Megan was building a stable and independent life for herself. She worked as a secretary for Smith Barney Shears Incorporated, which was a financial company located in Las Colinas, Texas. She had recently moved from Dallas to Irving and had settled into a small apartment where she lived by herself. After years of personal struggle, Megan had celebrated being sober for 5 years through the Narcotics Anonymous program. She became a volunteer at a Dallas emergency shelter that helped homeless youth and adults, and she gave her time and energy to help people who were in crisis. On October 5, 1994, the normal routine of Megan's life was suddenly broken. That morning, she didn't show up for work, which was totally unlike her because she was such a reliable person. Her coworkers immediately felt like something was wrong, so they tried calling her, but nobody got an answer. They got more worried, so they contacted the management of her apartment complex and asked them to do a welfare check. A maintenance worker was sent to Megan's apartment, and he went in through the unlocked sliding glass door, and what he found inside would change everything. When he stepped into the apartment, the maintenance worker found a really disturbing scene and quickly called the police. The officers who were responding got there soon after and saw something that confirmed their worst fears. Megan was lying face down on the living room floor and she wasn't moving. The paramedics confirmed that she was dead. The cause of death was obvious right away: multiple stab wounds to her chest. How brutal the attack was really clashed with the calm, organized life Megan had been living. Even though her death was so violent, the investigators quickly noticed certain details that really stood out. Megan was fully dressed, and there were no signs of sexual assault or that she had been tied up or anything. The apartment, though, told a story of fighting and chaos. A small table and a potted plant had been knocked over, and slices of bread along with Megan's purse were scattered all over the floor. The scene suggested that some kind of fight or confrontation had happened. When the detectives kept searching upstairs, they found more evidence. Blood traces were found on the railing of the staircase that led to her bedroom. And inside the room, dresser drawers and bathroom cabinets had been pulled open, and someone had gone through them. It wasn't clear if anything had been stolen, but the mess pointed toward either a burglary that went wrong or someone trying to make it look like that's what happened. The investigators worked really carefully to write down every clue, hoping to figure out what had happened inside Megan's home that night. Crime scene technicians collected a bunch of forensic evidence. They got fingerprints, a palm print, and several biological samples from different areas of the apartment. These findings gave the detectives a little bit of hope that someday science might be able to identify the person who did this. The fact that there was no forced entry also made them think that Megan might have known the person who hurt her, someone she trusted enough to let inside, or someone who could easily get into her apartment. Even though the investigation started out promising, the trail quickly went cold. In 2025, after more than 30 years of not knowing, Megan's case finally had a breakthrough. New advances in forensic science let the investigators look at the biological evidence collected from her apartment again, the stuff from back in 1994. This time, the DNA samples were processed using modern testing technology, which was way more accurate than what they had when the case first went cold. When the results came back, they gave them the lead that the detectives and Megan's loved ones had been hoping for all this time. The new analysis found a clear match in the National CODIS database, connecting the DNA to a man named Darrell Patrick Goggins. The investigators soon found out that Goggins had lived right next door to Megan at the time of her murder in 1994. This revelation really shocked people who were familiar with the case. The whole time, the person who did it had been someone living right next to her. Goggins wasn't a stranger to the police. He had a criminal history from before that included multiple offenses, and that's what led to his DNA being in the national database. Once the match was confirmed, the detectives started putting together Goggins' connection to Megan and what his possible motive might have been. The police records and witness statements from 1994 were looked at again with this new evidence, and it made the case against him stronger. The combination of DNA evidence, living so close to the victim, and his criminal background gave them a really solid foundation for an arrest warrant. In June 2025, the law enforcement officers found Goggins and arrested him. One officer said what a lot of people were feeling, stating, "Thanks to the collective effort from family, friends, media, and law enforcement, Megan John's case was never forgotten, and justice will finally be served." Irving Police Chief Derek Miller said, "For 30 years, justice has been patient, but justice does not forget." Megan's best friend Kelly Chance said, Finally, we are here, and I just busted out in tears." Megan's half-sister, Bridget John Scott, was just 9 years old when her sister was killed. She said that the work and dedication from the detectives never went unnoticed. She said, "When I showed up here again unannounced, Sergeant Rowan had a picture of Megan in his personal wallet. It is a testament to how passionate these detectives are about unsolved cases." Retired Irving Police Sergeant Tom Rowan said, "I wish Megan was still here." After more than 30 years of heartbreak and questions nobody could answer, Megan's loved ones could finally start to find peace, knowing that the truth had finally come out. In January 2015, the streets of San Francisco's Bayview district in California erupted in gunfire at the intersection of River Avenue and Ingle Street. An arrest wouldn't happen until a decade later. Maria Lourdes Souza was born in 1983. At 32 years old, she was the proud mom of 3 lovely children who meant absolutely everything to her. On January 27, 2015, tragedy struck in the Bayview district of San Francisco. At the intersection of River Avenue and Ingle Street, Maria was outside her home with her 3 children when a violent shooting broke out. The shooting involved 2 vehicles, a black pickup truck that people thought was a Dodge Ram and a black Infiniti. The witnesses later said that the people in the pickup truck started shooting toward the Infiniti in what looked like a targeted attack. The police officers quickly responded to the scene after getting reports of multiple gunshots. When they got there, they found Maria and she had been shot. The horrifying scene was full of confusion and panic as her children stood nearby, totally terrified by the sudden violence. Emergency responders rushed Maria to a local hospital to try to save her life. But even though they tried their best, she died from her injuries shortly after getting there. As the investigators started putting together what happened in order, another really grim discovery came up. The authorities were told about a second victim connected to the same incident. At Bayshore Boulevard and Oakdale Avenue, the officers found a man in the passenger seat of a vehicle that was riddled with gunshot wounds. He was also taken to the hospital, but was pronounced dead when he arrived. The violent attack had taken 2 lives that day. The San Francisco Police Department immediately started an investigation to figure out what had happened and who was responsible. The detectives started looking for witnesses who might have seen the vehicles or recognized the shooters. They looked at surveillance footage from nearby businesses and questioned people who lived in the area, hoping for any clue that could point to a suspect or a reason why this happened. Even though they tried really hard, leads were hard to find. The way the shooting happened with moving vehicles and rapid gunfire made it really difficult for the witnesses to remember clear details. The community, which was shaken by losing an innocent mother, became fearful and careful about coming forward. As time went by, the investigation faced a lot of challenges, and without solid evidence or cooperation, progress started to stall. Eventually, the case went cold. In August 2024, almost a decade after the tragedy, the San Francisco Police Department's Cold Case Unit reopened the investigation. The detectives went back to the evidence, reviewed old witness statements, and used new forensic technology to try to find possible leads that had been missed before. After a year of really intense investigation, progress came in August 2025. The authorities announced that they had arrested Anthony James Tyree, who was alleged to have been the passenger in the black pickup truck during the 2015 shooting. The investigators believe that Tyree was the person who started shooting, which set off the chain of events that killed Maria and the second victim. The arrest came after a ton of detective work, which included reviewing ballistic evidence, analyzing firearm records, and tracing connections between people who were tied to the vehicles involved. Tyree was formally charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. On top of these charges, he faced counts of being a felon in possession of a firearm, along with special allegations that he had intentionally used a firearm and participated in a drive-by shooting. When they executed a search warrant at Tyree's residence in Pittsburgh, the authorities found an AR-15 short-barreled ghost gun rifle. The weapon, which couldn't be traced by serial number, showed just how serious the charges were and how dangerous illegal firearms really are. The investigators took the rifle as evidence, making the case against Tyree stronger and highlighting the bigger issue of ghost guns being used in violent crimes. Law enforcement officials said they felt a deep sense of relief after the arrest. For years, the case had been a painful reminder of the lives that were lost and the justice that hadn't been served yet. The dedication of the cold case detectives combined with improvements in investigative methods finally brought the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. The police publicly said that they were grateful to have reached this point in the investigation. They talked about the years of persistence it took to identify and arrest the suspect, and said they were satisfied that Maria and the other victim were finally getting the justice they deserved. Maria's sister, Gabriela Sosa, said it was just a relief. She said it was like you could breathe now. It was like a pain in the chest. It's like everybody can really rest and be calm. She added, "I kind of forgave that person because I know that is something that my sister was. She would forgive. She will be upset with you one day, and then the next day she will be talking to you just because family always is strong." In October 2011, a 17-year-old boy laughed, danced, and celebrated with friends, not knowing that the night's end would mark the beginning of a haunting mystery. Blake Tyler Chappell was born on February 7, 1994 in Panama City, Florida. He was the youngest son of Melissa Becker, and he shared a really close bond with her. Growing up, Blake later moved to Georgia. Melissa often said her son was kind, imaginative, and hilarious, a boy whose laughter could instantly brighten up any room. At the age of 17, Blake was going to East Coweta High School in Georgia. He was a bright student with a curious mind and lots of ambitions. One of his biggest interests was in broadcasting, and he dreamed of having a career in television news. He had enrolled in a TV news production class at school, which he absolutely loved, and it sparked his fascination with storytelling and media. Outside of school, Blake lived a full and energetic life. Music played a huge role in his world. He was especially passionate about rap and often spent time writing, listening to, or sharing tracks with his friends. On October 15, 2011, Blake went to his high school's homecoming dance in Newnan, Georgia with his girlfriend. It was a night filled with excitement and laughter as students celebrated together. And for Blake, it was a chance to enjoy a special evening with someone he really cared about. After the dance, the couple went to his girlfriend's house with her mother's permission. They spent the rest of the night watching movies and enjoying each other's company in the comfort of her home. Around 2:00 a.m., Blake decided to leave his girlfriend's house to walk to a friend's home nearby, where he planned to stay for the night. The walk wasn't far, and it was a route he knew really well. However, sometime between 4:30 and 5:00 a.m., Blake left his friend's house again, planning to go back to his girlfriend's home to see her one last time before the morning light. That small, sweet gesture would unknowingly be the last time anyone saw him alive. When Blake didn't come home later that morning and didn't answer phone calls or messages, people quickly got concerned. His family knew something was wrong because it wasn't like Blake to disappear or ignore people trying to reach him. By that afternoon, his mother reported him missing to the Newnan Police Department. At first, the investigators thought that Blake might have run away or was just staying with friends, since there were no immediate signs of foul play or a struggle in the area. As the investigation kept going, the police found an important detail: a text message Blake had sent to his girlfriend around the time he disappeared. In the message, he said that he was walking, was cold, and had been stopped by a police officer, but he told her that he was okay. That message, sent from the Summer Grove Parkway area near a bridge and creek system in Newnan, became the last known communication from Blake. It was a chilling clue that would later raise more questions than answers. Nearly 2 months later, on December 19th, a group of people passing by alerted the Newnan police after finding human remains in a local creek near the same bridge on Summer Grove Parkway. The remains were soon identified as Blake Chappell. He was found wearing only an undershirt and underwear and had suffered a fatal gunshot wound to the head. The investigators searched the area really thoroughly, but they couldn't find his missing clothes, the jacket, pants, and shoes he had worn that night, and they also couldn't find his cell phone, wallet, ID, or any other personal belongings. As the detectives kept trying to piece together what happened that night, one mystery stayed particularly troubling: the police officer Blake had mentioned in his final text. The investigators tried to figure out who this officer was or whether anyone had actually stopped Blake, but even though they tried many times, no leads came up. With no witnesses, no physical evidence pointing to a suspect, and very few answers, the case eventually went cold. Blake's mom, Melissa, said in an interview, "I just want to know why. Just allow us to have some peace. He was just an innocent child. He did nothing wrong." A billboard asking for answers along Highway 1941 in Jonesboro called for tips. Melissa partnered with the nonprofit Seasons of Justice to raise money. In late 2024, 13 years later, the Noonan Police Department made the decision to officially reopen the case as part of a new cold case initiative. Detectives started re-interviewing witnesses and going back over every detail of the original investigation, really determined to find the truth that had escaped them for over a decade. With advances in modern forensic technology, the department used updated tools and digital data analysis to look at old evidence again. The investigators also followed up on leads that hadn't been explored before, looking for any connections or inconsistencies they might have missed in the earlier case files. On September 12, 2025, after almost 14 years of questions nobody could answer, the Noonan Police Department announced a major development. The authorities revealed that they had arrested a man named Scotty Elliott Smith, who had confessed to being involved in Blake's death during multiple interviews. Smith faces several serious charges, including felony murder, aggravated assault, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, concealing the death of another, and tampering with evidence. In an official statement, the police chief said he was grateful for the relentless work of the investigators who had spent years trying to solve the case. He commented, "This arrest is the result of countless hours of dedication by our Criminal Investigation Division and the support of the Coweta County District Attorney's Office." He also acknowledged the community's enduring trust and patience, emphasizing how crucial their support had been in keeping the case alive through years of silence and frustration. Even though an arrest has been made, the investigation is still active. The authorities continue to look for additional information that may help clarify more about the circumstances surrounding Blake's tragic death. The authorities didn't share a motive for the case or details that led to the crime. In the meantime, Smith is being held in the Coweta County Jail.